Usual, we're going to have a collective presentation with several individuals who will share their stories of pursuing a degree in career and education. First off, we'll have Mr. Tom Hostler, Superintendent of Perrysburg Exempted Village School District. Some of our noted faculty here at the university in the College of Education will have Dr. Natasha Johnson, Dr. Rhonda Daggiton, Dr. Sijana Slenchiva Durst, and Associate Lecturer, Mr. Eric Pilcher, and graduate student, Ms. Amira Archer. Presenters are going to share their personal viewpoints and also their personal experiences that will help us sort of shape where we need to go to greater diversify the teaching profession. So given that, I'm going to introduce Dean Ray Whitty, and do want you to know that he currently serves on the 2021 Diversifying the Education Profession in Ohio Task Force through the Ohio Department of Education. And he represents the state university segment of the education deans. So given that, Dean Whitty, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And there we are.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see everyone's smiling faces. As always, this is just a wonderful opportunity to kind of bring everyone together. We are extremely fortunate to have some very strong presenters tonight to kind of give you really kind of an in-depth look at what we do, what we're trying to do, especially in the sense of the diversification of the teaching profession. So as Colleen has already indicated, Tom Hostler is with us, and I'm just very pleased that he had time from his schedule to present for us. We have some great faculty, as you probably all know, and Natasha and Rhonda and Sijana, Eric and Amira. Eric is almost finished with everything, so he's ready to go for the summer. And I think Mira is not too far behind, which is great. So it's just wonderful to have this group together. Feel free to submit questions that you might have in the chat. We'll be watching and try to integrate those into the conversation either while it's going on or when we all finish and we have time for specific questions of the individuals. So with that understood, let's give all the time we can for our panelists. And Tom, I believe you're starting us off.
All right, well, thank you, Dean, and appreciate everybody taking the time and grateful for the opportunity. This is a very important topic, I think, for all educators. So superintendents across Northwest Ohio, across the state, this is something that is essential. And so I appreciate the leadership that the University of Toledo and the Dean is taking on this, and that's vital. So just a couple things for us. In our school district, if you were to grab one of our teachers and say, you know, what is our mission? And it's ensuring that all students achieve their greatest potential. And we stress the word all, because that is really vital to what we do. You know, when you think of a classroom of 27 students, we do really well with 25 or 26. But what about that 27 student? That 27 student who isn't that stereotype that people have of what a Perrysburg student is. How are we doing with that student? And that's been something that's really driven the work that we're doing. And to that end, it's preparing students for this future. And there's a couple things that we shared. We had a board retreat where we talked about our work with diversity, equity, and inclusion here in the district as we're starting to take these steps. But in 2045, it is estimated that that is the year that the United States will become a minority-majority nation. And I think that's significant because on the playgrounds today, that is where that change is beginning to happen. And when you take a look at what's changing in our world, in our state, and in our community, Ohio has 92.5% of their teachers who are white. And it's really setting up this kind of collision course, this intersection where we have a changing student population that we're serving, and yet the population of educators who are there to meet those students don't look like or have had necessarily the same experiences as the students we're going to be asking to teach. And that is a worry to educational leaders. That is something that we really have to address and be thoughtful about. In Perrysburg, 8 years ago, we were 89% white. The suburban, Perrysburg, if you don't know, we're suburban Toledo, just south of Toledo. And this past year, we're at 80%. So we're beginning to shift too. But our staff, 96% white. So that is a significant issue for us in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of reaching all of our students. So we've had some internal discussions about what are the things that we can do, one, to give our teachers that are here better lenses to work with all students. And that ranges from race to gender, socioeconomic. In the state of Ohio, 49% of the students we serve live in poverty, and that's significant. And in Perrysburg, we're running about 1 out of every 10 students lives in poverty, and people don't think about that. So a lot of the work that we're doing is trying to prepare students for that. But we're beginning to be challenged and concerned at the number of students that are actually going into education. And I know the dean shared something with me the other day, and I've shared this with some groups that I've talked to about this. And that is, as we're beginning to prepare students for a world that is going to look different than what they're experiencing here, we're seeing businesses begin to invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And many of our companies here, from OI to Dana, ProMedica, have started to reach out because they understand that it's in their best interest to prepare their organizations to have staff to be able to work with all the population, and that customers and clients are equally, they are similar. And so for schools, we're kind of lagging with this. And I think our challenges are this. We're seeing universities take this on and be very serious and with a great deal of fidelity. We're seeing companies take steps to prepare their workforce for this change. And here we are in K-12 wondering, what is it that we can do to help? And attracting quality teachers, number one, is vital to our success, and we're worried about that pipeline. Secondly, we know that the number of teachers that are available who are in that, the non-white category is shrinking. And I think the stat that Dr. Whitty shared with me, that the last time the number was taken, I think it was 2017, if I'm not mistaken, Dean. But in all the educational programs in Ohio in colleges, there were just over 800 Black students in the programs. There are 610 school districts in Ohio. If we found a spot in every one of those districts for each one of those 800 students, is that going to make a difference? And it's not. And we need to begin to have a conversation about that. And Dr. Duran is someone that I've talked to quite a bit about this. And I know when he talks to parents, how many parents from Dr. Duran's community are encouraging their children to go into education? There's not many. And so this is really becoming an alarm. And I think it's something that we have the students in our buildings. And I think we need to really begin to talk about our students who are in that population about careers in education, and make sure that we are keeping track of where they're going and what they're doing. We have a few students we've begun to talk to, and we're talking in HR about guaranteeing students an interview with Perrysburg schools when they graduate, and targeting, our graduates to get them to come back, and especially those that are in those populations. And finally, I think that we have to take this seriously as educational leaders, and we have to talk about these things. It's such an important part of what we do, whether it be a transgender student that is sitting in the classroom and the barriers that they're facing to being comfortable in the classroom. We may disagree or not about all different kinds of things, and politics have kind of seeped into that classroom. But when it comes to caring and supporting and loving our students, we know that is our mission, and that's what we have to do. And if we can make that student comfortable, or any of those students comfortable, they're going to be better prepared to learn. And that's our mission. And that's what we have to do. And frankly, we have a lot of work to do. But I think that educators are looking, they're thirsty for what is it that I can do to connect, to make sure that all of those students, that number 27 out of 20, that number 27 student in my classroom, what am I doing to help that student feel comfortable, safe in this environment, and more open to learning? And I think that's our challenge. But having that student look out in the hallway and seeing a student, a Hispanic teacher, a Black teacher, that makes a world of difference. And we need to kind of come together to figure out how to make that happen. So thanks. That was just very quick.
No, very much appreciated, Tom. For those who haven't kind of watched the news or anything else, Tom is a tremendous educational spokesperson, certainly for the region and really at the state. It's not uncommon for him to be in Columbus and testify on various issues. So, for Tom to be being as blatantly honest as he is regarding this issue is really quite telling. And I think we all need to put our heads together to really figure this out, because education needs to be seen as a viable alternative for our students, for all students, and especially students of color. So this is why we're here. This is why we're talking about it. And hopefully we're going to come up with some good ideas and continue to move forward. We will share what we're doing, but we definitely want everyone to be thinking about this and considering as many different options as possible, because this is not going to take just one solution. I think there are going to have to be several, and it's going to have to involve everyone. So once again, thanks, Tom. I'm sure there'll be questions later in the conversation. I would like to turn the mic over to Natasha. And if she would be so kind as to Natasha's wonderful. She's a great colleague and faculty member, and we're fortunate to have her. And I would very much appreciate everyone giving her our attention. So Natasha.
Thank you, Dean Whitty. So when I reflect on my personal story, it really starts with my mother. My mother was orphaned at the age of 17, and she always dreamed of being an educator. She was an elementary educator, but she didn't finish her teaching credentials until it was actually 2 years before I finished my undergraduate degree. But I always grew up with her as that force in my life that school was important. And she would always invest in summer programs and books and whatever it is that I needed related to my education. And when I was in high school, when I think back, I thought about teaching as a career, but I never really had positive, or other than my mother, I don't think people really encouraged me to pursue a career in education. I was a strong science and math student, and I graduated from high school in 1995. My counselors encouraged me to study engineering. So I found myself in college studying engineering, and I enjoyed studying engineering. It was interesting. It was, a challenge. I didn't enjoy the work of being an engineer. And by the time I was a senior in my engineering program, I had worked for Eastman Kodak. I'd worked for Mobile Chemical Company. I'd worked for General Mills, and I had not found that fit as I, thought about going off and finding a full-time job. And I was on the phone with my sister. We were watching Oprah together. And my sister is a pediatrician, and she was talking about Oprah Winfrey. And she said that Oprah said the first time she did her talk show, it was as natural as breathing. It was what she was meant to be doing. And my sister said, that's the way I felt the first time I saw a baby delivered or delivered a baby. And, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't feel that way about engineering. Like, engineering feels like work. But I really felt like I owed myself, I needed to pursue a full-time engineering position. And I went off and I found a position, and it felt the same way. I was at work one day after, I think, my second year in my engineering position. And while I was at work, the apartment building that I lived in actually burned down. And we had a meeting with the fire marshal, and he said, we're so fortunate that this fire happened during the day because people were at work, people were alert, people were awake, people were at school. He said, if this had happened at night, I think there were 90 apartments that were affected. He said, we would have had a lot of casualties. And I remember reflecting on my young life, like 22 or something, 23. And it was, if this were, the last time that I had to live my life, am I happy with what I was doing? And I wasn't. So I resigned from my job. I had no idea what I was going to do. My family said I was having a quarter life crisis. And the only other thing I wanted to do was teach. I was tutoring at my church at the time. And I decided to try to navigate, like I would watch the news and it was like, we have this shortage of teachers, we need teachers. And I would call school districts and I had no idea what they were talking about. It was like praxis this and certification this and licensure. And I really had gotten discouraged. The only thing that helped was, this happened in 2001. And it was a really tough time because of September 11th. And I was not working for a long time. Someone told me to apply for Teach for America. And I applied for Teach for America. And as controversial as the program is, it was a fast track. I mean, there's lots of alternative preparation programs now, but it helped me navigate something that was very, very foreign to me. And I was placed as a core member in Atlanta, and I started in the fall of 2002. And I remember talking to someone about teaching summer school in Houston, where I trained. And I had that opportunity where when I taught my ninth grade summer physical science class, it was as natural as breathing. It was the first thing that I'd ever done that I felt like used all of my natural talents and gifts and pulled everything together. And in the 15 years that I taught, it never felt like work. And I try to, as I work with my own students here at University of Toledo, just get them to remember, like, it's really a difficult job. Like it's impossible some days, but it's so much fun. Like I would often tell my students, because they were so funny, I was like, I can't believe I'm being paid to be here. Like, you guys are hilarious. So that's my story. And I think it's not unique because I really very much kind of fell into the profession. I think you have a lot of people who maybe have a calling and there's little whispers where they have an interest. But unfortunately, I think what we're dealing with is there's a lot of negative messages and images around the teaching profession. There are students, the messages are all around. The societal messages related to the pay, the fact that, teachers have to, work extra jobs or purchase things out of their own personal funds. There's a lot of negative messages I think that students are getting across the K-12 band that is affecting their interest in pursuing a career. And then also when you look at starting salaries, my students were shocked. I told them that I took, I think, a $10,000 pay cut to teach. And, you think about, certain populations, I was fortunate by the way that my kind of path unfolded, that I was able to take time off from work and I was able to pursue my teaching credentials. But, if things had happened differently, I may not have been able to do that. I was not probably willing or in a position to want to go back to school and work on credentials. So all of those things are factors. But I think the biggest barrier that we're facing right now in terms of recruitment is we really have to change the way that people view the profession. There's just a lot of negative messages about it. As enjoyable as it is, and a lot of students have very fond memories of favorite teachers and experiences, but there's a lot of things related to the professionalism in the way that teachers are treated, little things that I've been asked to do. I've been asked to pack up a classroom. It's just kind of like, well, in your free time, pack up your classroom because we're moving next year. Things that I would never could imagine being asked to do in the private sector, or things like, not having a proper time for lunch. We're on the schedule with the students, so you might have 20 minutes for lunch. That might be your time to, do everything that you need to do personally. So there's a lot of things related to the conditions that I think could be better. And as we think about recruiting, I really think it's important that we think about informal opportunities where students across all grade bands are going to have opportunities to work in schools, whether it's tutoring programs, programs for college students to go into classrooms and do activities, because I feel like a lot of people, the way that they've fallen into the profession has been very accidental and indirect, but it's when they're actually having these opportunities to interact with students that they recognize how much they really love the work. So that's probably one thing that I would recommend in terms of, and I think that's really one of the challenges in terms of rewards of being an educator. I think one that I share, and I know I shared it when I was going through the interview process, for me, it's always been my relationships with students. When you've been teaching long enough and you have students who reach out and contact you for advice or for help with different problems, it's really, really powerful. I haven't felt that way about any other job that I've had. And even this past weekend, I had a student who I taught last year, and she called me, she texted me, and she said, I can't decide whether I'm going to go to Mercer or Agnes Scott. And I said, I'm grading right now. But I said, if you can call me around 1 o'clock. And we had a conversation, and I was very, very honest about my experience. I talked about my experience looking for, this position. And I said, and Dean Whitty knows this, I said, you'll end up exactly where you're supposed to be. I said, you can't make a wrong decision. And for her to close that call and say, I'm the first person in my family to be able to go directly from high school to college. Just knowing that everyone doesn't have those supports and those resources. So to fill that void means the world to me. And I guess the last thing that I just really wanted to discuss, I'm going to check my time, is as I think about being a new assistant professor and being, charged with, training my seniors who are getting ready to go off into their full-time positions. I think what helps them is I'm very, very honest with them about the challenges of the profession, but also the joys and the rewards. And I think one of the themes of my class has been relationships in the classroom. And what I try to do every time we meet is get them to think about what the experience of school is from a student perspective and how important you are to that child's experience. So if it's a child who's sleeping, if it's a child who's not coming to school, if it's a child who's not dressed appropriately, whatever it is, recognizing that you have to love that child and get past that behavior or whatever that concern is. Because if the child feels connected to you, you're going to be able to get them to work. We talked about motivation last night, and I said, I can give you a list of 10 things to motivate children, from rewards or competition or whatever. I said, but the most important thing is your relationship with them, because I've been able to tell students, I don't have a good reason why I need you to do this. You may not ever use this again in your life, but I need you to do it. And for a student to say, well, I don't really want to do it, but I'll do it because you asked me to. Sometimes that's all you really need. But I have really enjoyed my first semester, and I do not take for granted how important the work that I'm doing here is. And I do hope that when my students finish my class and go off into their positions, they feel like they're prepared and they feel like they have the skills that they need to be successful, but also the support to come back as they experience challenges and need additional help. So that's my teaching story. And I hope I didn't go over my time, Colleen.
No, I think she's good, isn't she? And obviously, you're going to hear me brag all night, but I'm just so fortunate to have such wonderful faculty. This college is blessed. So, obviously Natasha started us off, and I'm going to ask Rhonda to follow that up. So Rhonda, please.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to try to follow up after Natasha. She really did it there. But Colleen, as we say back home, just wave a flag, okay, when I'm going over the time. So, okay, so I'm Ron Daggiton, just to give you a little background. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and this year I'm actually celebrating 30 years being in education, different hats in the field. So it feels like this is not real, that I'm actually saying 30 years in education. Okay, so I've taught only in the private sector, and I've taught like 3 different curriculum. I've taught the Trinidad curriculum is where I started. the Canadian curriculum and the British curriculum. So my experience with international teachers actually started at home, and then so preparing for today really had me thinking, I'm like, wow, I had to call my dad. Of course, he liked nothing better jumping on the bandwagon to help in this. So we came up with this theory of the threes and the trees. So I'm going to try and stick to my time. So when I reflected upon the challenges and the rewards, I was like, okay, we're going to go with the threes. And one of the challenges, the number one, was dealing with parents. I will never forget, Natasha talked about that child you just don't know. And I saw she was coming to school, her hair not combed, untidy uniform. I saw like a change in her over time. And I decided that I was going to buy a hairbrush. And I asked her, I said, can I comb your hair? And she was so happy. It was the second grade, my first year teaching. It was my second year. And I said, so she says, yeah, I combed her hair. Well, folks, you are not going to believe what that caused. That parent came to school the next day and was in my face, pointing her finger at me for combing her daughter's hair and telling me something about I can't make 50 French sailors do the same thing at the same time. Well, I decided I needed to resign. So, because that was a lot. So my first couple of years of trying to please parents was not easy, especially if they were a white parent. So it was interesting looking at my life, and even, since the George Floyd, how my life back home, when it came to racism, I've experienced way more racism back home in my own home country, even though we're the majority, in Trinidad, compared to 11 years here being in the US. I mean, I remember meeting people, like Vanessa Rubin and, some jazz artists, who were like, hi, it was completely different too, compared to back home with dealing with, parents of affluent, who were white and from affluent families. But if they heard my last name and they knew who I was and who my uncle was, there was a difference. So it was interesting how in order to survive, it was because they knew my uncle. And my uncle was a general manager of Hilton, and he was the first Black general manager of Hilton. And so only because of that was when the white community accepted me. But it was interesting working with teachers like from Canada. And, when I went to the Canadian school, it was completely different. It was like kumbaya at that school. We were all one love, as Bob Marley said, but again, being in those schools and dealing with the parents who were white and affluent and East Indians who were affluent, I had challenges. So that was one of my challenges, adapting to culture of schools and finding my own voice was a third challenge, but the reward was seeing my kids. I didn't care if the parents gave me a hard time, but I was very protective of my students, and teachers knew that in the school. Like, don't come in my classroom and don't discipline my kids. Those are my kids, So, and I was sharing that actually with my classes this week, that I was very protective of my students. So they saw this because it was ride or die for my students. It didn't matter how old, it didn't matter what school, and it didn't matter the socioeconomic background nor the gender. They were my students, my children. So to see them blossom and to see them grow was really important. And then reaching year 15 of being an educator and a teacher, finding my own voice, and contributing to schools and being recognized for my efforts, again, it was not from, teachers who were Trinidad whites. They were Canadian teachers and British teachers who, recognized my talents and my efforts. So I feel like coming here and teaching college students, I feel like I'm bringing stories with me, I'm sharing the stories and the experiences that I went through in order to help them understand what it's like on this side, to also help them understand as a teacher, how you can understand children in your class. You know, I had a student and I would share stories, like I would read up on Newfoundland in Canada so I would understand my student, you know, so I would incorporate activities and discussions and pretend that I know a lot about Newfoundland in my curriculum. So sharing like little tricks and tips and successes to show them, listen, when teachers or that teacher, you're standing in front there and you can just mention their name or something pertaining to their life, they will love you forever. And I think teaching them in 4470, they are seeing that, you know, now they're seeing their little third graders at their partnering school are falling in love and they can't wait to see them in person. They hate this virtual. So it's with this next generation, it's feeling with them, it's feeling for them, you know, and it's worrying about them. It's also learning with them and learning about them. And I try to model it and pass that along to, you know, to the teacher candidates. So I feel like I'm in an exciting time, you know, a new era of education with COVID. What do they call it at CNN? Generation C. Of, you know, helping them and telling them, listen, I feel overwhelmed too. It's okay, I'm right there with you. And constantly reassuring my teacher candidates that I am here for them. The same as how I was there for my kids in first grade to fifth grade, you know, that I keep telling the college students, it's the same, you know, I am right there with them. So I feel like my experiences as a teacher, as a teacher of color, a female teacher, you know, I've grown. It wasn't easy, but I felt like coming here, I've healed, I've blossomed, and I've learned so much more, and I haven't stopped learning, you know. So when I thought about, again, we're back to the threes, and I was like, are we living in a time where the forest is thick and it's dense? You know, are we living in a time where, and I start to think again of the 3 threes. So like one is the fear of facing the pain of our history. The other one is the fear of being overrun by numbers. And, you know, in Superintendent Hosser, you talked about that, you know, what's going to happen in 2045. Is that a fear amongst people, you know? And then the third fear is the fear of losing one's identity and oneself. So how could we spend more time in action? You know, how could, instead of analyzing, we keep analyzing situations, but how can we spend more time in action? How can we reassure everyone, listen, we're not, even if the numbers are going to change, we're not going to lose your identity. Reassuring them that you still keep your morals and your values and your beliefs and your cultures and your food and your outfits, your dressing, you know, you can keep that. But that's the beauty of diversity, that we are all different, but yet still there are similarities within us, you know, that we can share, and it's okay. I think it's helping people to not be afraid, you know. I think it's going to take time, even though I wish we could speed it up, but I know we can, because we got to wait for some who are not there yet, and that's okay. We'll still send love for them. But it's being patient and keep reassuring each other. It's going to be okay. We will be fine. Diversity is a blessing, you know, because when you look at the initials US, I couldn't help but think us, you know, US is us, you know, it's all of us in here. So I think I did it. Did I? I think I did.
Yes, you did. I saw no flag waving or anything else. So I think you definitely crossed the finish line and did an excellent job. So thank you. We have obviously more talented individuals to talk, who will talk to us. And next on the list is Sajana. So Sajana, hello.
Hello, everyone. This is now a triple challenge for me. Following these 3 introductions of you guys, I don't know, where am I going? I am Snejana Durst. It's a pleasure to see and meet you all. I am the one who represents a different field here, I think, in the panel, the field of higher education, policy and administration. We prepare educators of somewhat of a different kind, professionals who try to teach students to create learning environments for students outside of the classroom across college campuses, as well as faculty, teachers, instructors across college campuses. I'm also one of those, like my colleague Rhonda, and I'm also one of those who bring an international perspective to the college. I am Bulgarian by origin. I've studied in several countries. I've studied in Bulgaria, I've studied in Hungary, I've studied in the United States. So with my experiences, I try to instill somehow a different perspective, a perspective that comes from outside of the borders of my country. And one of my goals as a teacher at the university and in the college has been to try and open opportunities for my own students to have these international exposures, to have these perspectives that are so eye-opening, that are so brain-opening. I even see here on the call one of my biggest believers and supporters, the first one, Dr. Brady. Thank you. Perhaps you remember 10 years ago when with your support, you were the only one who trusted in that initiative initially, and you put the money to behind the trust. With your support, we opened an International Summer Leadership Academy for all of our students and made it compulsory, obligatory for all of our PhD students. So I am very proud of the initiative, and I was very proud that we could expose my students to other countries, to their educational systems, to their challenges and problems, as well as to their solutions, which I think in turn they brought back to the classrooms, to the institutions that they represented, and tried to incorporate very creative, very out-of-the-box ideas. How did I become an educator? Was the question I had to start with. Remember, 3 good presenters presented before me and completely confused me. So, how did I become an educator? I came to the profession of being an educator, I would say, rather late in my experiences. I went as a young kid after high school. I went to and through college with the flow. My friends went to literature and history. I went to literature and history. My friends went into finances. I went with finances. It was all about the college experience, the college life. It was just riding the boat a little bit. And I ended up, after graduating from my master's degree, I ended up going into administration and working for a university in their admissions department, recruiting students, marketing for students, gradually beginning to understand what being an administrator is at a college. And it was very new for me, and I liked it. And I kept at this profession for a while. I rose through the ranks. I learned different areas in a college campus environment until I reached a vice provost position. And when I reached that position, I was excited. I knew that I would keep growing. My boss, the provost, said, without education, you can't do much. You have to go do your degree. You have to go for your doctorate if you ever want to grow further as an administrator. So here I went because, it was good for my career. I studied my doctoral degree in higher education administration and policy at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And the first thing my department did was to make me a TA, teaching assistant. What a teaching assistant is, of course, I didn't. I had no clue. So my teacher, the teacher I was assigned to, an amazing woman who's one of the big names in the United States in qualitative research, Gretchen Rossman. Dr. Rossman grabbed me, threw a couple of chapters at me and said, you're teaching those chapters next week to the class. Huh? So that's how I started. It was an enormous challenge. I had no idea what I was doing. I cannot imagine I was useful to these master students. I could not imagine I taught them anything. And yet it was an exciting class. We bantered, we argued, we put stuff together, we drew through books. It was like the class went on and went even after the boundaries. And I remember at the end of the class, I went to Gretchen and said, when is next time? And I liked it. I did it for 3 years with her. She opened my mind to the challenges, to the excitement, to the pleasure and the privileges of being a teacher. I think it's a privilege because it keeps our minds going all the time. So after this experience, I decided that I will not be an administrator. I do not want to be an administrator. I want to be a teacher, and started looking for opportunities to get myself on that profession. It has been an exciting journey. I have enjoyed every bit of it. One thing the two main aspects I need to emphasize from my experience is that whom we expose our students to, or the role of a person, the role of a teacher, is critical. If it weren't for Gretchen, if it weren't for the way she nurtured me, she supported me, she held me when I was falling, which was quite often during these teaching experiences. The way she mentored me made all the difference. And as teachers, I think we are critical. I think our society is forgetting how important the personal contact is. It's everything in the end for the students. The other aspect from my experience that I want to emphasize is that I don't think I'll ever stop learning as a teacher. There are so many things I don't know. I enter every classroom every time. I may have taught the class a gazillion times. In every classroom I enter, I learn stuff. And these kids, these students, these adults I work with, they keep teaching me on a regular basis, and it's an exciting process. There's always so much to learn. And I hope I'm on time.
Yes, you're all on time. Sujana is obviously just a great colleague, and I'm happy to let everyone know it was a pleasure to see that Sujana moved through the system and obtained full professorship. We are very fortunate to have her. So thank you again. What I'd like to do now is move the conversation over to Eric. Eric is a very sought after instructor. The students love him, and there's for obvious reasons. And Eric, if you could share your story, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with such enthusiastic teachers. It's always re-energizing to see people who just care about teaching and obviously enjoy it so much. So thanks for giving me the opportunity, Dr. Whitty. I do appreciate it. Some of the things I think I just want to highlight are things that we've already heard. First and foremost, that joy should be one of the first things that we talk about when we talk about teaching. And that was one of the things that I think that we heard specifically from Dr. Johnson and Dr. Daggiton and Dr. Durst, that, you know, it's that joy. And so the research that I'm interested in, or the kind of approaches to teaching that I'm interested in now, kind of come from a lifetime of having been squeezed through an educational system that doesn't attend to joy at all. Now, I grew up in a big family, so most of my learning happened before school even started. I went to school ready to read, so they didn't know I went to Catholic schools, you know, the good schools where you get taught by people who have never really. Anyway, so they didn't really know what to do with me. They after the first semester of the first grade, they put me in the second grade in the second semester. Is this way to, I don't know what they were thinking, but the teacher there, Mrs. Duvey, my second grade teacher, was one of those teachers, you know, we're making like electromagnetic batteries, and she's giving me my own stuff to do because I was a wiry little smart kid. But anyway, so she lit the fire. Then I don't know that I saw another good teacher again until graduate school. Truth be told, I mean, I had some effective teachers, but no one who really forefronted joy and that courage and that wonder and that willingness to say, I don't know, good question, like, let's go find it out. So I think a big part of the work ahead, I think, when we think about what do we mean when we talk about recruiting and retaining a diverse and multicultural population of teachers, I think that might even be the wrong question to ask, because we may need to worry about attending to a culture internally first that really fosters an environment that's going to make non-traditional or non-white students feel welcome here. It's one thing to put together great promotional materials and to have teacher professional development days or whatever, but how can we authentically integrate those local communities in with the university community? And I know that steps are being taken, and conversations like that are an important addition. But rather than just those being an addition, I feel like that needs to be on the forefront of all that we do as we think about what are we really doing. I think it's important to note that we need to make sure that there should be students in these conversations right now, that we should be having conversations with students who, or maybe we should invite students who withdrew recently to some conversations like these, so that we can start getting a sense of what is the lived experience of students, aside from our sort of perspective, which again is important to have, and it's great to see local principals come and join the conversation. But I think students are important stakeholders. They have to have some sense in why they're going to shape, or how they get a chance to shape the environment. So when we think about the problems of recruiting and retaining specifically non-white teacher educators, the problem is that we unfortunately, and I can speak to this, through my own experiences back when the College of Education was over at Snyder Memorial. We really front load the technical stuff, and we give kids tests to make sure that they don't teach to the test, and we prepare them in such a way so that the result becomes we get candidates for teacher education who are really, really good at doing school because they want to continue doing school. But they're not really good at the real work of teaching, which again, Dr. Johnson and Dr. Durst and Dr. Daggiton focused on, is building relationships, adapting to this impossibly messy, contradictory and paradoxical profession that I've recently been heard called a postmodern science. Like, how do you attune individuals to have the kind of joy and wonder that Dr. Durst and Dr. Johnson and Dr. Daggiton possess? And so as I think now about the work ahead for teacher educators, the questions even shouldn't be questions, because that's almost insulting, I would imagine, to say, well, they're trying to actively recruit and retain me. So if our only experience in the lives of students of color is at recruitment time, well, now we're only going to continue perpetuating the sort of perspective that, oh, here's another institution trying to just continue, like, either getting into my pockets or elsewise marginalizing. So I think the work we really have to do is ensure, that there's a lot of perspectives at the table, because we can see that those perspectives can help us understand what it is that brings joy to these environments, that helps us realize that teachers never get young. Never get old. Oh man. Actually, it's both at the same time, it feels like. But because we're always getting challenged and questioning things and moving forward. So there are certain people who are going to say it's like the worst job ever. But I think anytime you see real, authentic, genuine teachers, they sell themselves, sort of. So getting these stories out into the community and getting the community stories into these spaces, I think, are critical steps towards that continued, hopefully, trajectory of progress. I didn't know we had a time limit, to be honest with you. That's kind of all I had.
Well, we really don't have a time limit, but anyway, as always, Eric, your energy is infectious, and your message, I think, is outstanding. So thank you very much for sharing. We are fortunate to have one more individual on the panel. Amira is going to join us, and Amira? Not yet.
Amira's
No.
Amira's also my partner in crime. Hey, Amira. Amira, you want me to talk a little longer while you change your Zoom settings?
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Now
There we go.
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. You guys put me after Eric. I don't even know what I was going to say now. Hi, I'm Amira Archer. I'm born and raised in Toledo. I went to TPS school. So then after I graduated from college, I got a chemistry degree and I went and worked in a chemistry lab. And then I just was so unfulfilled. I never ever thought about teaching as a career, but I was so unfulfilled in my job that I just was like, man, I'm doing science all day and I love science, but I want to talk to someone about science. So I came back and I got my master's of education through the LAMP program in 2013. I graduated. And then I went and started working at Scott High School, which this would be my 8th year, but I'm on sabbatical leave right now because I'm finishing my dissertation. So hopefully by the end of this year, I'll be done. It was really important for me to go back to TPS because while I was in the industry, the science industry, working in a chemistry lab, testing medical devices, it was very rare that I would see other people that look like me. It was very rare that I would see diversity at all. Matter of fact, I was like the butt of all the jokes in the chemistry lab to the point where I was like laughing. And then I'm like, why am I laughing? This is actually not funny that you're laughing about the lack of diversity in this field. So to me, I had to be a science teacher so that I could show other students that you can go out here and increase the representation, and there are Black girls that do science. So I had to be a science teacher, and I'm so glad that I did. However, when I went into the classroom, I found that this is not even about science anymore. At this point, the educational space for my students, specifically in urban Toledo, where I felt like it was very necessary for me to go, it was daunting, it was depressing, it was oppressive sometimes. So when we're talking about, talking to parents and parents are not, pushing their kids to go into education, like imagine this. Would you expect a prisoner to get out of jail and then go back and be a prison guard? And like, I want to go work for that prison. And I hate to be so forward about it, but some students, and I'm gonna steal from Dr. Johnson, she said that school is an unpleasant place for some students, especially Black and brown kids in the United States. So for students to be in this space for 13 years, right, K through 12, and they have these experiences that are sometimes oppressive, why would we expect them to want to go back and be a teacher? Unless they're going to go back and be the type of teacher that they always wanted, or the type of teacher that feels like they're going to go and liberate students who are like them, or the type of teacher who's going to go and teach for joy, like Eric just said. But then they might come through a teacher education program that is not focused on that, just like Eric just said. So I was thinking a few things. When I think about like, what can we do to diversify education? I think we need to start with the experiences that students have in their K-12 classrooms. If they are experiencing education as a vibrant, fun place where they're happy and they are affirmed and they are recognized and they are reflected in the curriculum, and their teacher is interacting with them through a relationship in a way that, uplifts them, then that's the ideal space. That's what kids want. Then of course, maybe they might want to come back and go through education. But then if they come back and they're going through a program where they're knowledgeable about the inequities and the injustices in the system, but they're not even being explicitly talked about, it's kind of like an elephant in the room that's being swept under the rug. So then let's say you do have a population of diverse students within your classrooms, but then you're not even explicitly addressing the issues that plague their community, then we've dropped the opportunity that we had. I can tell you from my own experience in my doctoral classes, I have felt safest in classrooms where the professor explicitly acknowledges matters of diversity and inclusion and equity, and in a way that they're knowledgeable about what's going on, and that my peers don't feel okay to make ignorant comments. Because honestly, as a minority myself, and I hate using that word, but as a member from a diverse population of people, like we all are, being in a classroom where people just, blurt out things that I find offensive, and they don't even know because we're a product of our own environments, sometimes I feel like I have to be the person to rebuttal it. I have to be the person to speak up and say, like, actually, that's not right. Or actually, that's not the right perception. Or actually take a look at through this lens. But when I have a professor in the classroom and I feel like they can do that for me, then I feel safe in that space. I feel like I don't have to always speak for a whole population of people. I don't have to speak for women. I don't have to speak for, you know, my father was an immigrant to this country. I don't have to speak for them. I don't have to speak for Black people. I feel safest in a space where it is explicitly acknowledged. And then another thing is like courageously correcting these deficit ideologies. It's hard to have conversations. I mean, sometimes talking about race, it's still taboo to people. Sometimes talking about the injustices or inequities that are real, people don't even want to believe that they're actually happening. Like, no, that's just leftist, that's just liberal, no, let's find a way to say it way easier. Let's find a way to not offend people. But to me, and I know I hear people saying like, it's getting better, we're going to progress and we'll be more diverse and all these things. But to me, I feel like every single day that we haven't made progress is another day that my students are going to suffer at the hands of someone who just doesn't know, not even necessarily that someone is trying to teach them from a deficit perspective. But if you don't know better, how can you do better? And then I just want to share with you this story. I had a group of students. I went to Aaron Baker's class. I took my students from high school. We came on campus. We took a little tour. We stopped by Aaron Baker's class. He's a colleague of ours who's also a PhD student who's not here right now. And I had 3 foreign exchange students with me. I think it was was it my chemistry class or Avid? I don't remember. But there were 3 foreign exchange students with us. One was from Russia, one was from Kenya, one was from Tunisia, and then all of my Scott students. And all of the students in his class, they just wanted to ask the foreign exchange students questions like, how do you feel at Scott? What is it like over there? Was it a culture shock? Like they were all wanted to ask them questions. And I understand. And, you know, honestly, my students were like, if we can be honest, the education system, like, you know, the way we see our peers interact with the teachers is crazy. We would never see anything like that where we're from. Like the kids don't talk to the teachers like that. The teachers don't talk to the kids like that. There's harmony in our classrooms. And at first, all of the students were like, wow, that's such a shame. I can't believe it either. That's right. And immediately start to point the blame at the students. But then I had to interject, like, the teachers in your school in Tunisia, do they look just like you? Yeah. You know, all the kids, all the teachers look the same. The teachers in Kenya, do they look just like you? Yeah, all the teachers, and we're Kenyan, the students, the teachers, everybody looks the same. What about in Russia? Yeah, everybody's the same. Okay. In America, we have a very unique cultural gap. And I can't speak for all countries because I haven't been everywhere. But like Dean Whitty was just saying, and thank you for inviting me, by the way, there is such a cultural gap between the teachers and the students in the school that we cannot really compare what's going on in our classrooms to other places. Like the teachers and the students are from vastly different spaces with vastly different lenses, with different perspectives, and all they know about each other is what they grew up knowing about each other. There is no harmony. So not necessarily that I think the teaching population has to be that only brown teachers can teach brown students, but we have to change the way we're thinking about our students before we go into the classroom. And I think the only way to attack these deficit perspectives so that students can have better experiences within their schools is to explicitly address them and to courageously correct them. So that's my piece. I probably had a lot of other things I was going to say, but I followed Eric and then I just got way thrown off. So
that's okay. It's Eric's fault. We understand that. Clearly, everyone on the call can just kind of get excited about the range of speakers and what they've been able to show and tell regarding this topic. And it is complex. It is not as easy as just trying to draw students into a program. It is really taking a reflective look for each of us and what we do and how we do our business on a day-to-day basis. It's not by chance that as a college, we're having ongoing conversation and trying to move that further into some recognizable action that we want to pursue as a college in regards to anti-racism and just recognizing that it's important for us to have that conversation. I think, genuinely respect each other. And for that reason, I think we can have those kinds of conversations. And we need to have them, and we're going to continue to do that. As well as recognizing, the fact that how we do this work matters, because our students, that's why we're here. And if our students don't feel safe, if they don't feel valued, if they're not treated like everyone else should be treated with that respect and value, then we're not educators, we're something else. So I think that kind of just ties in, I think, from a variety of comments that you've heard tonight, in the sense of how important this issue is, internationally, nationally, statewide, region, and we're attempting to try to address that, and we're going to continue to do the work. And thankfully, we have individuals like yourselves who are interested, who are supportive, and allow us to do this important work on a number of levels. And I don't think we would be able to do it as well as we are attempting to do it if we didn't have that support. So with that said, Colleen, I'll throw it back to you. Do we have any particular questions or issues that have been brought up through the chat?
We do not, but I posted a general question. Maybe if anyone would like to share their own personal experiences of a teacher that so inspired them. I know Tom Brady had mentioned about practicing engineering when he was a youngster. So I don't know if there's anybody who'd like to tell their own personal perspective.
Hi, I would like to share my experience. My name is Fatima, and I'm in my last year of my PhD. Right now, I'm doing the process of submitting my proposal for my dissertation. At the same time, I'm an ESL bilingual teacher at Sylvania High School, both Northview and Southview. And my kids go to Perrysburg, so I would like to say hi to Tom Hostler and for everything they're doing in Perrysburg for the kids. And this is one of the experiences that I really would like to share about Perrysburg school districts. When I moved to Toledo in 2017, I had the chance to substitute through the district from K to 12. And the Diversity and Inclusion Committee was just started, and they started to have these meetings and to invite us as parents to be part of these meetings. Although it wasn't like not that much people used to come to these meetings, but I think it is like a good step to start educating some of these staff members, and also involving parents and people in the community to be part of the sharing the culture of the home with the school. So I can see that in the future, this might be a very good opportunity. We're still at the beginning, but I can see this could become something really good. Now, the other experience I would like to share in Perrysburg, that they give me when I substitute, the opportunity to make, like, let's say, to transfer my culture, where I come from, with the students when I used to teach them, and share my experience with them, to build this relationship with the students. Although I wasn't only a substitute teacher, I wasn't teaching like a certain subject. At the same time, whenever I found that there is an opportunity, that I asked the teacher to let me come and let's say to talk about a chapter that is related to my culture or my religion. If my own kids, like my daughter and my son, they were taking a chapter or in a social study class or a language art class, teachers would allow me to come to the building and teach during that day for that class for the rest of the students. I really appreciate that, because this was, I think it's opened a lot of eyes for both teachers and the student, asking me questions, and we have this conversation. But with working with, for me working with Sylvania School as an ESL bilingual, we have a lot of refugees and immigrant students there. At the high school level, there is a lot of refugees, Syrian students. And there is really, this is a big issue with having a big gap between not having a prepared teachers to teach second language learners. And this is my dissertation, what it's going to focus on, because this is an issue that I found. And I'm not saying that it's the fault of a certain people or the administration. I think it's a national gap, because this is what I have been reading through my researches and articles. There is a big gap between the teachers who are in service, especially teachers who are teaching secondary level to second language learners. And I assume after I hear everybody's talking with minority and we can include that English language learners are part of the minority students, yes, we have a big gap. For me, I can see the solution is it's going to take a long term to recruit people from different background knowledge to start like teaching in the school system. For me, I would see a very fast solution is to make professional development training for in-service teachers as are required at the beginning of each year, and as a required course and educational program at the university, because it's teaching the majority white teachers who are teaching our kids in the public school. There is a big gap. They don't know a lot of things, and there is a lot of assumptions in their mind and the way when they come to teach, because they're focusing more on the core state standards. Especially, I'm talking about secondary level very specifically, because it's more focused on testing and Ohio State testing. It's not about how to teach in terms of culture and linguistic issues and meeting the needs of the students, minority students, and in general, like including everybody. Thank you. I just don't want to take the time of everybody, but it was nice to hear everybody talking.
No, we very much appreciate that, Fatma. This is part of, I think, the real essence of kind of the series of Coffee with the Dean. It's sharing ideas, updates, things that we're attempting to do, and I think hearing from the collective group. I think we're just better for that when we do that. So, Tom, you have.
I was the one that referenced engineering, but it wasn't about engineering. It was about thinking about how you really interest kids in the teaching profession. And it occurred to me, and by the way, one of the statistics is that in the last 8 years, there are now in the country 1/2 as many teacher candidates as there were 8 years ago. So it isn't just a diversity problem, it's a teaching problem in general. But when you're thinking about both diversity and attracting people to teaching, it occurs to me that when I was a kid, I was allowed to do what got me interested, right? Engineering, making things, ripping cars apart, doing things maybe my father would get arrested for today, I don't know. And oh, by the way, the kids down the block were involved in dance and became dance instructors or artists or whatever. But we don't have any way to engage kids as youngsters in teaching. And I guess I'm just asking this question, is there a way to begin to really engage kids in something that they can get excited about teaching?
Tom, that, as always, you always have good questions. Any general thoughts or responses?
This is Deb. I'd like to respond because I think about that question a lot. I did write in the chat that my dad did not want me to be a teacher. He said I had so much going on and I should go into engineering or architecture or something of that type because of my math background, and I have never regretted being a teacher. But I asked my students in class, and many of my students have been told the same thing by people, and we talk about that in class and how they feel about it, why we want to teach. But I also kind of think about a little bit about what Tom said, and the reason that I have a PhD is because one of my professors, when I was just working on my master's as a teacher, said, have you ever thought about getting a PhD? And I had thought about it, but nobody ever asked me, so I don't think something of that type because of my math background, and I have never regretted being a teacher. My students in class, and many of my students have been told the same thing by schools, in K-12 schools, and especially even in our classrooms in the junior high setting. But I also kind of think about the real teacher, and so maybe there's something about what we could do with students in schools when they're younger or ask me, so I don't think I ever want to be when they're going to be juniors in high school. being a teacher. And then somehow, I don't know, motivating them or helping them understand what it's like. But I wonder about that a lot.
Very good, Deb. I got a little bit of breakup, so I wasn't quite sure, but I think I got the general response. So yes, I think a lot of people kind of don't realize it's there until they know. And I think that's part us. One of the things I pride myself on is, especially representing this college, is that I call us, we're full service. We will take you from your beginning licensure program all the way up and through your doctorate. That is such a wonderful luxury to have that in your backyard. It's something that we should be continuing to scream and holler and broadcast on a minute by minute basis, because that is extremely rare, and we're just fortunate to be able to be in a position to offer that. Martha, did I see your hand go up?
Yes, I worked at Washington Local for 4 years, and they actually had a program in the high school where students who were interested in teaching actually were assigned to teachers to do certain teacher things. So I had one of these high school students come in and help me in the junior high, and we appreciated their help, and they learned a lot in that little bit of time. Also, I'm a consultant in a school, and we had an 8th grader, it was last year before COVID, who the special ed teacher just kind of gave up on her. I don't know why he did. So I went, and she couldn't read. She was probably 2 or 3 grade levels below 8th grade, but a wonderful student and a hard worker. So I worked with her teacher, and we talked to her, and we said, do you want to work with like the preschool kids? Because we were all one building. It's a K through 8 building, or pre-K through 8. And she said, I would love to teach them reading. So she set up a whole program. Her mom helped her. She had her after school stuff set. She had summer. She was going to work with the kids in the summer at the library. And it was going to help her, but then COVID hit, and then all of her plans were canceled. But I think if in the K through 12 buildings, if we give them those kinds of opportunities, even the students who struggle, like this girl, I know she would have increased her reading level had COVID not hit. She was so enthusiastic. So I think if we look more, maybe as professors, as a consultant, I do that kind of work, but maybe as professors, we could get into those buildings and, I don't know, start those programs. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you got to get through people like Tom, and he's pretty.
Okay, Tom.
He's pretty sizable, and then he can block pretty well. Having been in the PK-12 environment for as many years as I did, I understand the need for following certain set procedures, whether it's just the functionality of buildings and operation of grades and
Right.
standards and getting students moved along and so forth.
Right.
That makes sense to me, but I think that always has to be paired with really smart, creative instruction. When I worked where I did, I never made it a point to kind of go into the classroom to micromanage. The teachers we gave them the freedom to be able to do what they needed to. Yes, the students needed to be able to do this, this, and this, but they had the freedom to orchestrate that in such a way that they could find their own path and could eventually get them that way. Sometimes in today's world, things are so scripted that becomes more difficult to do. But I have always remained of the viewpoint that if you can find passion, and it's just evident in the conversation and the presenters that we've had tonight, passion wins over. Passion will take the day. And if you have a student who just loves to go see that teacher because they're passionate. They're going to be there. They're going to try their very best to make sure they're in that classroom each and every day. And I think that's what really it's all about, making sure everyone feels that passion, making sure everyone is part of that conversation and that learning environment, and just being aware of how important that is, and never really kind of veering off from that mission. Probably easier said than done, and certainly during a year where all the rules got thrown out, all the textbooks didn't matter. It was, you know, how can we make this happen? And you know what? We made it happen. Now, granted, we're going to be doing some catch up. There are going to be some things that need to happen. But if nothing else, it's shown everyone that now more than ever, educators are essential. We can't survive as a society without high quality individuals teaching our children. And that has to be the priority. And any person that will listen, I tell that to. Sometimes Tom listens to me, Tom Brady listens to me, Tom Hostler never listens to me. Sometimes Tom Brady listens to me. But you know, it is important to kind of just confirm that that's really the most important thing. Yes, I love my doctors. Yes, I love my pilots. But if you've heard me enough times, everyone here is where they're at because they have had, hopefully, a teacher or teachers that have made a difference in their lives. We need to continue to do that, and we need to continue to make sure all students feel that way, and we need to have a broad representation of that instruction so that everyone feels connected and everyone gets the passion. So I'll get off my little soapbox. I know, Colleen, what else is on our list to cover for the conversation because we're getting close to our time period to end?
I think we're at the end. We've done just great conversation. Thank you, everyone. So much energy. I've taken great notes, so I'll go over these tomorrow. We will be posting this onto our YouTube channel. But again, thank you so very much.
Yeah, we do actually review the notes and the comments, and we try to obviously do this better, and we get a lot of good ideas. So thank you for the participation, and have a wonderful warm evening, and spring is on the way, and I keep telling myself that, and if I say it enough times, it's going to be true. So spring is coming. Everyone, have a great evening.